is to have such a polarizing player and one to basically cover about the LA Dodgers, who's been doing it for quite a long time, and a guy that I know knows a thing or two when it comes to Shohei Ohtani at the plate or up and on the mound. My good friend Jeff Snider joining us. So before we dig deep into LA Dodgers baseball, because there's so much to talk about, and even with what I witnessed on a Monday night, I felt like, and you can agree, last night was just so rich. And the fact that Fox Sports and everybody that covered, the telecast, I mean, you're bringing back history that no other major sport at all in our lifetime could ever trump what Major League Baseball basically has from a historic standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Fox Sports does a great job of covering Major League Baseball. And like you said, everybody who they brought on the show, on the whole broadcast was awesome. The game was great. They picked two good teams to play that particular game. Obviously, couldn't have planned for the added significance with Willie Mays passing away right before. But having the Giants there in that game was, it was a good idea even before that. And it was a stroke of luck that they happened to have the Giants there to help pay tribute to Willie Mays. Yeah, it was I didn't care about either team in the game, and I watched the whole thing. That's how good it was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember being there from the time when they announced that Major League Baseball was playing on Field of Dreams for that first year. And I thought, that walk-off home run from Tim Anderson in the White Sox, I mean, that was what it was meant to be. I mean, it was meant to be like you soak on the moment and you're just like, I just remember watching the film as a kid. And for something like that to happen was like, that wasn't even up and on the script. It was just, you were in the moment and you just couldn't help but just appreciate just how grand baseball itself was, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we saw last night was that you don't need a walk-off homer. You had, you still had moments. You had Mason Wynn. You had, what's the name of the kid from Alabama for the Cardinals? Burleson?
Yep, Burleson, yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, you got guys who got to have their big moments. You got, I mean, and my highlight was the 2 innings of Bob Kendrick in the broadcast booth with Joe Davis and John Smoltz. I could listen to Bob Kendrick tell stories forever and ever.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I mean, good Lord, I've grown up, listening to, watching the Yankees for as long as I have, and even just growing up as a kid when I would listen to Vin Scully every single game that there was. I mean, it was a storyteller. It felt like I was just hanging out with my great-grandfather, watching Dodger baseball, learning more about history and some of the players, whether it was rookies or, 10-year veterans. It didn't matter. There was always some sort of story to tell. So I will tell you, so I went to Coors Field on Monday night. And when I tell you, Jeff, the atmosphere, when you have a polarizing player like Shohei Ohtani, you just couldn't help but just appreciate the moment. The fact that in the at-bat, from the first to the last, everybody's pulling out their phones, taking pictures, recording videos. I mean, when you get a polarizing star like that, and people, they just have no choice but to do something like that. I mean, it just tells you how amazing that the moment as it is. And I've told my friends and a lot of colleagues, I'm like, if you haven't seen Shohei Ohtani in person in your lifetime, you better plan a trip whenever he comes into town, because it's just a once in a lifetime moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy that he's polarizing, because there's nothing not to like about the guy, unless you hate the Dodgers and that's the uniform he's wearing now. I mean, the last 6 years of his career, he wasn't polarizing. He was just universally beloved. And now that he plays for a team that people hate, now he's suddenly polarizing. But what do you not like about Shohei Ohtani? He's so much fun to watch. He's so, everything about Ohtani, his smile, he is the perfect star for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I agree. So, and eventually we will get to see him pitch, hopefully next year after he recovers from surgery. And that'll be something that I think could definitely be the icing up on the cake. One player I never got a chance to see up in person, and it kind of sucked because it happened the day before, was Mookie Betts. So as of right now, there's no surgery that's requiring, but it is in fact a fracture. So I mean, how impactful without Mookie Betts up in this lineup is it for the Dodgers? Have they basically figured something out as a backup plan? Or I mean, what did you think about that when the impact of the lineup without Mookie Betts in it?
Yeah, it's definitely a big impact. Mookie was the front runner for MVP when he got hurt, and it's hard to replace that. They do have a built-in plan B in Miguel Rojas, who is a great defensive shortstop, and he's been a solid hitter this year. He's nothing like Mookie Betts offensively, but he's been solid, and that gives them time to figure things out. They still have a month and a half before the trade deadline to figure out what they need to do, see how Mookie's healing, all of that. I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and get themselves a shortstop once more teams realize that their playoff chances aren't that great. More teams are open to trading. Dodgers go get a shortstop. And when Mookie comes back, he goes back to second base. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But the way this Dodgers team is built, while any team would struggle to lose Mookie Betts, the Dodgers at least have a built-in backup who's better defensively and isn't as huge a step down offensively as a lot of teams might have been in that situation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the fact, everybody's basically got the Dodgers on their radar as basically the team to beat. Now, we know last season with how it capped off before Ohtani arrived it was kind of hard because the fact that there was this young and hungry Arizona Diamondbacks team that came in and just kind of shocked everybody by the time they ended up beating the Dodgers in that series. But I've said to many people when it came to when Ohtani got signed, this team, for the last several years as I've watched them, they've won their division title. They've been to the postseason multiple times. But the question of it is, can they get over this hump? Because I know I've been there when I watched them win in a short COVID year when they won the World Series, and I still thought it was kind of grand because, again, you played hard, you most deserved of it, but will it be that next step, knowing that we got a full season on our belt, and can they potentially bring a title back to LA?
They definitely can. The postseason is a crapshoot a little bit. It's designed for more teams to have a legitimate chance at winning the World Series, which means by definition, there's less benefit to being the best team in baseball because a team like the D-backs can get hot, or a team like the Padres the year before can get hot. I laugh when people talk about the shortened season because you know what the postseason wasn't? It wasn't shortened. It was the longest postseason in history. They had an extra series in there. Dodgers were the first team ever to win 13 postseason games in 1 year, and they did all of them while living in a hotel room instead of at home. And so, you know what? 2020 was legit, and 2024 will be legit when they win it again. I kind of like that the Dodgers aren't necessarily the hands down best team in baseball this year. The Phillies and Yankees are both really good. The Guardians apparently are good. There's maybe that's a little bit different expectations going in, but honestly, like talking about Mookie Betts, I think this might end up being a blessing in disguise for the Dodgers because he has really struggled the last two postseasons. And I wonder if it's just the wear and tear. We talk about Shohei Ohtani. Mookie Betts is the opposite kind of superstar. Shohei, you just look at him and you're like, that guy's a superstar. Mookie, you look at him and you think, how does he do what he does? And so I think it might be hard on a guy who's as small as he is to play the full 6 months. And so, having a couple months off right now, coming back for a month before the season ends might be great. We might get a fresher Mookie Betts in the postseason. And, every team deals with injuries. Every team deals with hot streaks and cold streaks. And the fact is 29 teams don't win the World Series every year. And I think it would be a sad life to think that the fans of those 29 teams all consider the season a failure because you know what? Baseball's fun. The 6 months of watching baseball are fun. Watching the Dodgers come back against the Rockies on Tuesday night was a lot of fun. The game didn't matter. It was the first place Dodgers against the last place Rockies. Who cares? It extended the Dodgers lead in the National League West from 9 games to 10 games. Who cares? It was fun because baseball's awesome. It was so much fun to watch.
Oh, it's so much fun. I mean, I can't get enough of it because there's always a storyline to basically talk about when it comes to baseball. One particular player, and it's kind of funny because, I mean, like I mentioned before, when I when I started the show. My mother originally grew up in Long Island, New York, and one name in particular that she absolutely loved watching for years was a Stony Brook kid named Craig Biggio by the time he was there in Houston. So I'm watching the young son of Craig Biggio, Kevin Biggio, who comes in and is looking for a fresh start since his stint with the Toronto Blue Jays. When evaluating him, what are some of the takeaways that you kind of get from Kevin? And could he be a difference maker with an already powerful lineup that the Dodgers basically have, and even helping up on the defense as well?
The version of Kevin Biggio I've seen so far is not a difference maker. He is a placeholder until the trade deadline when the Dodgers figure out a better option. He was a guy who was available. He's a better option at third base against right-handed pitching than Kike Hernandez, who can't hit right-handed pitching. Beyond that, like that's the best thing I say about Kevin Biggio is he's a better option against righties than Kike Hernandez, and that is faint praise. He is definitely not Craig Biggio, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, watching his dad, Craig, for years, I mean, the guy was phenomenal. And the fact that he can move from catcher to short was just something else. You know, it was great. So one thing I will say though, and I usually always look for X factors in a lot of lineups, but Teoscar Hernandez, man, I mean, the guy looks like he is definitely the X factor in this lineup, because anytime I watch him, whether it's a situational type of play at the plate, he's either going to be hitting home runs or he's going to be hitting gappers. When you look at a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, I mean, this is a guy that you are hoping has a full season on his belt, but at the same time is a guy that could potentially be an X factor when it comes to postseason time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Teoscar's been awesome this year. He strikes out a little more than I would like, but that's really the only negative thing to say about him. And when he doesn't strike out, he hits the ball really hard. He's had some huge hits for the Dodgers. His personality is great. He's great in the clubhouse. Everybody loves him, and just had some really big hits. Overall, his clutch numbers aren't actually that great, but the big hits he gets, you remember. And, you know, having the 3-run homer to take the lead in that game Tuesday night against the Rockies, the 11th inning double, 2-run double against the Yankees a couple of weeks ago, like just some huge hits, the kind of hits you remember. And that's what makes a legend about a player, because most guys who you think of as great clutch hitters actually weren't that great in the clutch. Like Derek Jeter, great clutch hitter. His clutch numbers were almost identical to his regular numbers. He was just a good hitter who got a lot of opportunities to hit in clutch situations. Kirk Gibson, one of those two of the most famous homers in baseball history, he was a little bit below average overall in clutch situations. David Ortiz, same thing, just a good hitter in those situations, same hitter though, all these guys. And so Teoscar, like it's getting the hits that people remember. That's what creates a story about a guy. And he's had some big hits that people remember.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, good Lord, the shot out there into right field, and especially when his body's got so much damage up on it, it was just unbelievable. I mean, I could listen to the call for days, and it was just so historic that night. So when thinking about it, because of course we got All-Star Game that's right around the corner, and we've also got the trade deadline. So you mentioned about potentially some shortstop help. When evaluating the trade deadline, because we know the Dodgers definitely find pieces to really kind of fill in the holes that they know that they need, because they are looking for a deep run, not just something where it's just like, well, it's a plug and play type. So any of the names that kind of catch your attention that you think the Dodgers really are targeting or such? Because I looked at earlier and people were evaluating, well, Pete Alonso could definitely be up on the market. I'm like, come on. They already got a first baseman. Well, what are we doing here? But are there some names you kind of see an attraction to that I think could definitely fit in that Dodger blue?
Well, Pete Alonso has a teammate who does play shortstop, who, Francisco Lindor is a guy I would love to have on the Dodgers. That would be definitely leaning into the evil empire a bit to take on another big contract like that. But the Mets last year, to get out from under some contracts, they paid off some of it for Verlander and Scherzer. And so if the Mets want to pay some of Lindor's contract, I could see that happening. Bo Bichette is an obvious possibility if the Blue Jays decide to sell. That's kind of the thing, because there are so many teams, like 90% of the league is either in a playoff spot or within a couple games of a playoff spot right now. And so over the next 6 weeks, it's hard to know what's going to happen, which teams are going to be sellers. And Andrew Friedman and Brandon Gomes in the Dodgers front office, they've surprised me so many times that I've stopped trying to guess what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I can kind of identify what positions I think they'll be looking at, but I've given up on trying to guess what they're going to do because they're a lot better at that job than I am at guessing it.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, when the pockets start talking and like all of the rest of it, they figure out a way to really make it happen. And so it's just so incredible to just kind of see it and witness it before our very eyes. And the fact that this is just the golden age at least for the Dodgers, picking up a lot of these talents. So Clayton Kershaw, I saw on his rehab up in Rancho Cucamonga, and a guy who really has been the heart and soul of the Dodgers. I mean, I've loved watching him pitch from the day his rookie year and all the way up until now. Nobody's touching that immaculate 12-6 curveball that he always just seems to throw. So when you think about it, how much left in the tank do we really have up on Clayton Kershaw? Because I know for a fact he's going to retire a Dodger regardless. So, how do you kind of see this playing out with them?
Honestly, I think, obviously Kershaw wants to win another World Series, and I think he wants to get to 3,000 strikeouts. He's like 55 away right now. And so him coming back probably in, around the All-Star break is really good for his chances, because that means he's going to get probably 10 starts this year, which means he has a very real chance of getting to 3,000 strikeouts this season, which when he had the surgery, I didn't really think it was possible. I was expecting him back more in August, maybe even late August. And so getting back that early, he's got a real chance of getting to 3,000 strikeouts. If Kershaw gets to 3,000 strikeouts this year and the Dodgers win the World Series, I would be shocked if he doesn't retire at that point. But, if one or both of those things don't happen, if he doesn't quite get to 3,000, Dodgers don't win the World Series, he does have a player option for next year too. And I think he would be back next year. As far as what he has in the tank, it's hard to say, but I mean, his stuff looked good in his rehab start for a first rehab start, as good as you could hope. And one thing we've learned about Kershaw over the last several years, as his fastball has diminished, he's still been just as effective almost as a pitcher. Not quite prime 3 Cy Youngs in 4 years, and should have been 4 in 4 years, Kershaw. But, he has been one of the best pitchers in baseball when he's been healthy, even with the diminished fastball. And so I think that he has a real chance to do that. And the nice thing is the Dodgers don't necessarily need him to be that because they have Tyler Glasnow. Hopefully Yoshinobu Yamamoto will come back healthy. They have Gavin Stone, who's been great this year. They have Bobby Miller, who's back from injury now. They've got a lot of options for a postseason rotation. At this point, honestly, Kershaw's my favorite player of all time. I'd be surprised if he's in the Dodgers postseason rotation, no matter how well he pitches, just because of what they have available. I think he'll be on the roster, but I doubt that he'll be starting many postseason games for them.
So a fun question I'd love to ask you, and then one last one before we head on out. But so I could tell you my household, growing up as a kid, my mother was a Yankee fan. I was the opposite. I mean, I watched so much a mixture of Yankee Dodger baseball until eventually I can't wait until the A's get into my hometown of Las Vegas. But there's so much of my family members, they're all diehard Dodger fans, and they've all been around at the time when you could think about the immaculate infield between Russell and Say and so many others. Was there ever a favorite Dodger that you really had from all around the long years as you've watched this organization that you really loved watching? Because I'll tell you one thing, a side note, I've watched so much minor league baseball in Las Vegas with the 51s when they were affiliated. So I've watched Billingsley, I've watched Kemp, Ethier, Loney, and Russell Martin. Was there ever a guy that you loved watching in the Dodger blue that was just like he was the definition of Dodger baseball?
There's been a few of them. My first favorite player was Mike Marshall, not the great relief pitcher, but the bad outfielder / first baseman. And a lot of that was because my older brother, was a little fast second baseman. His favorite player was Steve Sachs. And so I figured, okay, if he likes him because he's little and fast like him and plays the same position, well, I'm a big lumbering right fielder. I guess I need to like Mike Marshall. And then as time went on, as a teenager, Eric Karros became a favorite of mine. And into my adult years, I was at Russell Martin's first game, and he became a big favorite for me. It was hard for me. The same week that the Dodgers non-tendered Russell Martin, they also signed Juan Uribe, who at the time was my least favorite player in baseball. And so they non-tendered my favorite and signed my least favorite. And so it was definitely testing that whole Jerry Seinfeld rooting for laundry. It's the name on the front that matters. They put that to the test for me. But, there's been plenty, but Clayton Kershaw has surpassed them all. As I've watched him as a player and as a person, my sons love Kershaw. My 17-year-old son has worn number 22 all throughout his life because of Kershaw. My first game as a Dodgers season ticket holder was opening day 2013 when Kershaw pitched a shutout and hit a home run. Just like Kershaw's great. And I named one of my sons after Sandy Koufax, who I never got to see play, but Sandy Koufax is kind of the one Dodger who I wish I could have seen play. And I guess with my last name, I have to throw in Duke Snider too. But, there's been, I just love the Dodgers, man.
I'll tell you, especially for my pops who may be watching the show here tonight. I mean, he's been a diehard Dodger fan from birth, but I'll tell you, he's got so many different jerseys, got a Sandy Koufax classic Brooklyn Dodger kind of look to it with LA. And I've gifted him when they won the World Series in 2020, I gifted him a Justin Turner jersey because I was like, that guy just reminded me so much of the Penguin, Ron Say, because he played great defensively. He was a guy that had a clutch stick, especially when you needed runs. The guy was just immaculate. So much rich Dodger history from there.
Justin Turner is my wife's favorite. So.
Oh, man, so good. I mean, I loved it. The fact that I could see a modern-day Ron Say before my eyes is like, good Lord. Like, and, I would prefer that than Juan Uribe at the time when I'm like, yeah, he could not make a stop whatsoever. And then swing in and yeah. So one of the things I will say, though, a side note, so Major League Baseball is eventually going to make it to Las Vegas officially when the A's break ground. Here's what I will say about this. Out of all the baseball markets, from LA to New York to Chicago, I mean, baseball runs through the veins. And when I think of Las Vegas, I just hope that the history for baseball itself, and even for the A's, they do this right. But here's my thing. When the Dodgers break ground into Vegas in the very first series, when it happens, when the stadium's built, I mean, everybody, I would maybe say from all the way to the tip end before you get into NorCal, all the way down before you end up hitting the barriers of San Diego, is going to be bleeding Dodger blue all over the place. But yet that's got to make somebody like Magic Johnson feel pretty happy because the fact of bigger money, new money, international money. I mean, how do you kind of see this play out when the Dodgers officially play in Vegas?
Yeah, it's just another city for the Dodgers to call home. They're already, Dodger Stadium South in San Diego, and Dodger Stadium Southeast in Phoenix, and Dodger Stadium North in San Francisco, and Dodger Stadium slightly less south in Anaheim. So yeah, so we might as well get a Dodger Stadium Northeast in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is a Dodgers town, and and so there will be people in Vegas who are just excited to have a team, and they will become A's fans or whatever the team is called. But most people who I live in Utah. Salt Lake is hoping to get an expansion team. I hope we get an expansion team here. Guess what? When the Dodgers come to town, I'm wearing Dodger blue. I'll root for my Utah team when it's not against the Dodgers, when it doesn't affect the Dodgers. But if you're a Dodger fan, you're not going to change just because you get a local team. And so it's going to be the same thing in Las Vegas where, it's going to be 90% Dodger fans when the Dodgers play in Vegas.
Oh, yeah, man. I can't wait for it. The second that I end up visiting my hometown, I mean, I live in Denver now, but the second that I visit there, I mean, it would mean the world to my old man. The fact that watching the Dodgers originally from Dodger Stadium in the 80s and further in beyond would make his day to be there in Vegas and just seeing them play. But so final note, so my prediction, and it has been everybody's prediction, and I'm sure you know, for as far as World Series preview, we are awaiting the series that everyone in America is just waiting for, which is the Dodgers versus the Yankees. You know, I made a funny note that I felt like the second the recession hits is when the final pivotal point of the inflation is when the Dodgers Yankees face off in the World Series, because ticket prices, all this stuff is just going to be blowing through the roof. And then eventually prices will start coming down. I mean, to have this World Series, I think, is what everybody, and even in Major League Baseball, has been waiting long years, because of two of the most expensive franchises in one big stage, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's what Major League Baseball wants. It would be huge for ratings. It would be, first time historical rivals. They've played each other in the World Series, 11 times, but not since I was a toddler. And I've got all this gray hair now. Like, it's been a long time since the Dodgers and Yankees have played in the World Series. And so, yeah, it would be awesome. I'm a little bit cautious about that because I remember doing a radio spot 2 years ago when the Dodgers and Mets were about to play, talking about the NLCS preview, Dodgers and Mets. And then both teams got bounced in the first round. And then the next, last year, it was the Dodgers and Braves, NLCS preview. Both teams got bounced in the first round. And so that's the thing about the playoff schedule these days, with so many teams making the playoffs, it being a different style of baseball, because a team with two great pitchers can be mediocre in the regular season and then great in the postseason. Depends on who gets healthy, all that stuff. It's a hard slog to get to the World Series. And so even if the Dodgers and Yankees go into it both as favorites, I'd still put the chances at 10% that we actually get that matchup. And, but if we do, that would be awesome, because my mom doesn't understand why I don't hate the Yankees. And I'm like, Mom, I was born in 77. Like, the Dodgers lost the World Series to the Yankees, the first two World Series of my lifetime. I don't remember those. The Dodgers beat the Yankees when I was 4 years old. I hardly remember that. And since then, the Yankees are just another team to me. So I would love to get that rivalry back so I could start having strong feelings about the Yankees again.
Good Lord, it would just be a hell of a matchup all the way through and through. And the fact that, I mean, they acquired Juan Soto this year, and especially with the way that their lineup is put together. Now, the question is, if they're pitching, that'd be one other thing for another time. But, I mean, the whole world would be going bonkers the second that, the Dodgers and the Yankees would face off in the World Series. And it would just be like, man, I just would have to wait to see what the revenue and the TV ratings and all the rest of it start to be like by the end of the series as a whole. Appreciate your time, Jeff. Really talking a lot about Dodger baseball. Where can people find you to bleed the blue and really get locked on those LA Dodgers?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a daily podcast 5 days a week called Locked On Dodgers. You can find it on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. I'm over on Twitter at Snidog, SNIDOG, mostly talking about Dodgers there. And I love talking Dodgers any chance I get.
Absolutely, man. Well, appreciate you taking on the time and talking Dodgers. We will see you. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll see how it pans out for those LA Blue Dodgers.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, man.